Since you have watched so much cricket, who is the greater leg spinner, Chandrasekhar or Vaughan?
I'm going to go back a little. Why do we start with Chandrasekhar? Way back in 1954-55, I watched Subhash Gupte. Subhash Gupte to me is the greatest leg spinner India has produced. He had two googlies. The first one, he'll bowl, so the batsman, it's the more obvious one, will pick it and think, I can pick his googly. Then he'll bowl the other one later. He was a master of flight and he had tremendous control. And please remember when the three W's, Worrell, Walcott, and Weeks, were playing between 52 and 56, they went around telling everyone that the greatest spinner they had faced was Subhash Gupte. So that's number one.
Getting on with the session. I don't know how many of us were present. We've just witnessed a very inspiring and extraordinary session where a set of people, ordinary people achieving extraordinary things, have talked about how Gandhiji's thoughts help effect real change in today's world. Our book for this session, although about cricket, remarkably throws light on Gandhiji's connect with cricket. We are privileged to have Vijay Raghunath and S. Giridhar, two incurable cricket romantics as they are often called, at VLF 2024 today. And moderating this session will be Padmanabhan Pillai, Paddy as he is called among friends. Thank you for being here. Paddy is a self-employed businessman and as the founder of the long-standing Nagpur Quiz Club, is an accomplished quiz master. Thank you, Paddy. Thank you. I've read about him and he has mentioned like growing up in the pre-Google days, same as my generation, an innate curiosity of facts and trivia led him to develop an abiding relationship with books. He's been a voracious reader since then and strangely enough he likes reading fiction and non-fiction alternately because variety is the spice of his life. He loves the outdoor and that takes him hiking once in a while. And a sense of his drama leads him to the theatre often. So thank you, Paddy. We are honored to have you here and look forward to a great session with you. Our authors for today's sessions, Raghu and Giri, have been friends for close to 4 decades. Cricket has been a part of their lives for much, much longer. Raghu, a stylish left-hand bat, and Giri with his leg spin, were fearless close-in fielders in their playing days. Cricket and its fraternity have been a part of their lives for longer than many of us here have walked on this planet. Over the years, their newspaper columns and essays have kept the art of storytelling in cricket alive. Raghu and Giri are currently associated with the Azim Premji Foundation in Bengaluru. Giri is the COO of the Azim Premji Foundation and Raghu consults with the foundation quite often. I would like everybody to please put their hands together and I ask Paddy to please set the ball rolling with Giri and Raghu. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am very happy to be a part of this session. It's an honor for me. Thank you so much, Raghu and Giri, for being a part of this session. Again, too many questions to ask and we just have around 45 minutes time. So without wasting any of your time, we'll begin right away. Giri, you were 28 and Raghu, you were 38 when you guys met for the first time on a cricket field. And today, it's been a friendship of over 40 years and it has also resulted in 2 successful books. I'd like to know how it all began and what was the journey like all these 40 years about your friendship.
Okay, so Raghu and I did not meet on the cricket field first. It so happened that Raghu was already manager at the Carborundum Universal factory when I joined the company in the marketing team. And it so happened that we then played together. The fact is that both of us have a lot of common interests. We love cricket, we love to read about cricket, we love to discuss about cricket, and we love books and we like to read a lot of books. We like a lot of things together. So what happened is you enjoy each other's company. And if I may say so, both of us are relatively simple, uncomplicated people. So that helps a lot because then there is no problem at all. We remained in touch, even though I moved away to Delhi and Raghu continued in Chennai. We remained in touch. It so happened that when I joined the Azim Premji Foundation in 2002, it was very early days for the foundation, so I'm one of the earliest members there. Somehow, when I traveled into rural parts of India to look at education and contribute as part of Azim Premji Foundation, I suddenly found an inner urge to begin writing. And in fact, my initial writing was on what I saw on the ground regarding public education in the country. But from there to write about cricket seemed to be a natural step given an interest in the game and having played it at some level. And Raghu and I were always in touch, and we got together and started writing a blog. And in fact, the first few chapters of Mid-Wicket Tales Paddy is in fact a series of blogs we wrote for ESPN Cricinfo. And then afterwards, we created a column called Mid-Wicket Tales and wrote it for First Post. And then when I was in the Azim Premji Foundation, I happened to be approached by Sage Publications, said, "You're doing all this, isko kyun book nahi bana dete?" And that's how Mid-Wicket Tales in 2014 became our first book. And then it's a kind of nasha. Then you enjoy the process. The process of writing is very nice and you enjoy each other's company, discussing and stuff like that. And together we wrote our second book called From Mumbai to Durban, India's Greatest Test. And there we tried to describe the history of Indian cricket since independence by picking test cricket and by picking 28 of India's most important or momentous test matches. And that's how the second book happened. But the story of today's book, Paddy, if I can conclude here, is that Sage Publications shut down their book division. We thought, ठीक है, 10 साल हो गए, book भी मर जाएगा आराम से. But you know, the book is blessed, as I've written, or we have written in the foreword. We got in touch with a couple of publishers, and Speaking Tiger Book said, "We'll publish your book. Just you need to update it a bit." And what we did is we didn't update any of the older chapters. Because you can't update a chapter like that written at that time in that milieu and that mahol. So what we did is we added 7 new chapters and a thick concluding chapter to talk about the last 10 years of cricket. And that is how you have Mid-Wicket Tales, a century and more of cricket.
Raghu, comments from you.
Hello, can you hear me? What Giri didn't mention, the whole process started when Giri was traveling as part of Azim Premji Foundation with his colleague and the senior. The two of them had started the foundation. And one day, sitting in an airport lounge, in walked Salim Durrani. They were having a drink, and Salim Durrani came in, and Giri's colleague said, "Looks like a film actor." And Giri said, "Salim Durrani." And Durrani stopped, smiled, and joined them. It was a fairly empty airport lounge. And they talked for about 45 minutes. And during the talk, Giri had heard me mention some of the amazing things I had seen in Bombay cricket playing against Salim Durrani. One particular knock in Karjimkana. And Giri told him about what his friend Raghu had told him about Salim Durrani's batting in the Bombay ground. And when he wrote about it, we decided, hey, this sounds good. Let's write a few more. And that started the journey of writing those Cricinfo blogs.
I think this is for the first time in VLF history that we have 2 authors attending a session for a book. Everybody would like to know, like, what is the process that you follow, the writing process? Do you take turns to write chapters, or somebody's initiative, somebody's leads, or you write together?
Well, there are some chapters, for those of you who've read the book or read parts of it, the chapter on Kapil Dev, for instance. The whole thing started, one of us will get an idea and talk about it, and then we'll sit down and discuss and write about it. the Kapil Dev chapter, you see, we all know about Kapil Dev, the bowler. And we all also know that Kapil Dev was a big hitter. But very few people knew that Kapil Dev played probably the fewest dot balls in one-day cricket. I was mentioning this to Giri. Giri is the data analyst between the two of us. Being 10 years younger, he is more adept with the keyboard. So I was telling him, look, most people don't realize that Kapil Dev rotated the strike and scored of almost every ball he faced right from the time he came in. Not with boundaries like Sehwag, but ones and twos, and he was an uncanny runner between the wickets. So that set us thinking. Giri mined a lot of data, and sure enough, if you read the chapter, you'll realize Kapil Dev stands there. You think of Dhoni, you think of Dean Jones, those of you who are older, all the one-day greats. You name any of them, Vivian Richards, any of them. Kapil stands there. He played the fewest dot balls, and of non-boundary runs, he's got the highest strike rate.
61.9. 61.9.
Yeah, he scored something like 62 runs of non-boundary balls, every 100 balls. And we also started, in that chapter, we talked about the running between the wickets and his amazing fitness. Kapil never missed a match due to injury. And he bowled 30 overs every day. All our fast bowlers of today can't even bowl 20 overs in a day. Kapil was, to me, the greatest cricketer India has ever produced. Period.
You also mentioned like Kapil was never run out.
He was never run out. Even though he scored so many of his runs with ones and twos, he was a brilliant judge of run.
I had a question on Salim Durrani Saab, but I'll skip that one since you've already answered. Okay, the first chapter that you write in this book, it's about the most underrated aspect of cricket called fielding. Something which the Indian cricket team rarely took seriously for a long time. About that chapter and about Indian fielding and how it progressed. I'm sure one of you studied you for Umrigar in school, right? I think it was you. About Indian fielding and about Umrigar and other players who gradually took fielding to the level that it's today.
I'll start. Since I'm older, I've seen very mediocre or terrible fielding of India because I started watching cricket from 54, 55 when New Zealand came here. That was the first test match I saw. All our cricketers were portly. Pankaj Roy, Chandu Sarwate, Vijay Manjrekar in his later days, all of them were slow movers, except for Polly Umrigar. Polly Umrigar, the Parsi, was the tall man who could run, field, take catches. So it was, you know, all of us who watched cricket felt very bad about Indian fielding because people held catches if it came very comfortably tummy height. Otherwise, our fielding was terrible. Yeah.
I'd like to begin first with an acknowledgement to our good friend Avijit Ghosh sitting there. Avijit was one of the people I didn't know then because you don't know who the manuscript goes to. But Mid-Wicket Tales manuscript apparently went to Avijit Ghosh before it got published.
For a review.
For a review. And Avijit, if I'm not mistaken, it was your suggestion that the chapters could be more randomly placed in a book like this. So it's actually a potpourri where after one chapter, you do not know the next chapter is about what. So just because we've written about Kapil Dev in one chapter doesn't mean Salim Durrani follows or something else. Something completely different will come through. So this book is a random assortment, almost as though we put chapter 1 to 34 and picked lots and sequenced them. He wrote, this is not like a detective novel that you need to read chapter by chapter to see इसने खून किया है. आराम से पढ़िए, जो chapter चाहिए पढ़िए, मस्ती में पढ़िए. That was the spirit with which he wrote. So my first acknowledgement to Avijit. The second point is, it so happens that although Raghu started playing serious cricket in the 60s and I played my brand of cricket from the late 60s in school and then in college and later on, both of us are very serious about catching. Both of us happen to be close-in fielders. Raghu is literally a fearless short leg. I've seen him take some amazing blinders, and luckily Raghu has seen me take a couple on the offside at close-in gully. But both of us enjoyed fielding. So if there is nets, for example, on a Saturday or something like that, we would love to go and do some catching for sure. And then we got discussing and we realized that slip catching has improved. Outfielding has already started improving. But short leg is nobody like Solkar at short leg. Okay. And then we got thinking about it and discussed stuff like that. And that's how we wrote a chapter on close-in fielding. And thanks to Avijit Ghosh and the random selection of chapters, close-in fielding became the first chapter.
And about the role of Mansoor Ali Khan Pataudi. About the role of Pataudi and fielding.
Okay. So some trivia here. Raghu 10 years older, no, that mantra. So Raghu saw his first test match in 1954-55. I saw my first test match in 1963-64. I saw the most boring test series ever. Mike Smith versus Pataudi's India, 5 tests, all 5 draws. It is a wonder and miracle that at the age of 9 or whatever that I saw that first ever test match. How did I ever see cricket again? It was such a boring thing. But the thing that I remember is, I think it was Mike Smith playing a cover drive, which was about, don't ask me how, as a 9-year-old, I remember something I saw nearly 60 years ago. But I distinctly remember Mike Smith cover driving one of our spinners, Natkarni, I think if I'm not mistaken, you have to check. And the ball was traveling just 10 inches above the ground to cover. And Pataudi diving full length in front of him and taking it inches off the turf. So for a child, the first ever great catch I saw was Mansoor Ali Khan Pataudi. I can never ever forget.
A big hand for Mansoor Ali Khan Pataudi, sir, please. Raghu, I'm told that your favorite cricketers are Neil Harvey and Shardul Thakur. I'm just kidding about the second part. Yeah, but one cricketer who finds his name mentioned in most of the chapters is Victor Trumper. In fact, in the previous edition of this book, his name was also a part of the subtitle. Can we hear about you from about Victor Trumper?
You know, early on, there was no TV. When I started watching cricket, we read about cricket. We read Ray Robinson, Jack Fingleton, we read John Allott, Neville Cardus. See, both of us have read almost any book written on cricket. And many of those books simply revered this Australian cricketer called Victor Trumper. And people like Ray Robinson, later there was a whole book which was written about Trumper. And they talked about Trumper the man, besides Trumper being an amazing cricketer. I'll give you just one story, just illustrate what Trumper was. England-Australia test match, a brilliant test in which Trumper scores something like 180 runs in the test match. Trumper, when he's not, in those days there were no professional cricketers. All cricketers had to work to survive because cricket paid nothing, peanuts. So Trumper in Sydney, Australia, ran a sports shop. He ran a sporting goods shop, largely cricket. Following his 180, a few days later, he was in his shop when a man came and said, I want to buy a bat. So Trumper was showing him a few bats. That man turned around and said, what about that? And Trumper said, no, that's used. It's not new. So the man says, I like that bat. So Trumper says, okay, I've played with it last test, scored 180 runs. So it's second hand. So instead of 4 pounds, you can pay 3 pounds. Can you imagine what it would have fetched today? What would a Tendulkar or a Kohli or a Dhoni or anybody done with it? They would have auctioned it and sold it for a few crores. So Trumper was that kind of man. He was totally guileless, absolutely warm and friendly. The other story is somebody came to him and said, Vic, I want you, I'm starting on a, I'm going to sell sporting goods. Will you play with this bat and endorse it for me in a test match? And all Trumper's colleagues said, you can't obviously take that bat. That's a blunderbuss which weighs 1.5 times the normal bat weight. Trumper said, poor chap, starting out, wanting to start trade, and he went and scored 70 runs, endorsed it and gave it back to the chap. So he was a very different personality, and so much had been written about him, and they said he was the greatest Australian test batsman before Bradman. Trumper played between 1900 and 1914, and he died soon after the war at consumption or something. 1918 or so he died, and 11 Australian cricketers were his pallbearers.
Can I add something there? Trumper figures in this book many times because of the nature of the chapters. So, for example, we have a chapter on opening batsman, he will feature there. We have a chapter on big hitting and quick scoring, he'll figure there. We have a chapter on nobility, he will figure there. We have a chapter on leg spin, and he figures there, and I must tell you why. There was a very good leg spinner called Arthur Maley, who's written a fabulous book called 10 for 66 and all that. It's a thin book, but it's a marvelous book. And anybody who loves cricket must read that because it's more than cricket. To us, Trumper represents the best of sport. Why do we play sport? Why do we watch sport? What do we learn from sport? Why does India love G.R. Vishwanath? Why does India love V.V.S. Lakshman? Why does India feel Dravid is special? Because they bring to life and cricket and society an image that, look, this is what sports is, and this is what sports is all about, and this is what sportsmanship is all about. So all the large-heartedness that Raghu talked about Trumper, to us is the epitome of why you must be a sports person. Why do we encourage our children to play sport? Not because we think that they're going to become IPL heroes and play cricket for the country. No. We think that they will learn how to lose well, how to appreciate an opponent, it's a lesson in life, which is why sports is integral to education. To us, Trumper epitomizes why sport is integral to education, why sport is integral to life, and why sport is a microcosm of society. Trumper was like how Vishwanath will be loved even 100 years later. Statistics be damned.
The next question is from my favorite part of this book. It's a small 2-page essay called They Too Played for India. It speaks about people who missed out on playing for India and those who could play just a single game. I'll read out a small passage from that book. Who do you think is more unlucky? More unlucky. Whom do you think did fate treat more cavalierly? Whose was the greater chagrin? Who is the more unrequited player? Is it the one test player for whom the door to Shangri-La was opened tantalizingly briefly, only to be shut in his face? Or is it the player who waited 10, 15, even 20 years in vain for the door to open so that he could just have a glimpse of Shangri-La? Can we talk about a few cricketers from both these categories, those who missed out entirely and those who could play just one match?
I'll begin briefly. I'll just begin briefly and Raghu can take on. See, this cricket is such a mega thing now that all we can think of are the players who play for the country and play IPL. But the game it's not built on them. The whole foundation of this game is the humble, honest league cricketer who toils through summer tournaments or winter tournaments, the domestic cricketer who plays Ranji Trophy, knowing very well that he will never make it to the Indian cricket team. Why does he do that? He travels in those days, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, would travel third class unreserved from Bangalore to Guntur or from Delhi to Jalandhar or Patiala or wherever, play a match and come back in anonymity with just the fact that so and so played for Northern Punjab against Delhi or so and so played for Kerala against Madras in those days. Why did they do that? It's the love of the game. Therefore, this particular chapter is truly a tribute to the backbone of the game in the country. The 150 players of IPL or the few hundred players who represent the country, hats off to them. But don't forget that this game in the country and in many countries is built on first class cricket. In Australia, it's the Sheffield Shield cricketer. In England, it's the county cricketer. And in India, it is the first division cricketer and even the first class cricketer and the first, second, third, and fourth division cricketer like me, who has to play because he likes it. Why at 45 do I go and bowl leg spin? Because I love the game. What if I didn't bowl? I think the game will wither. Over to him.
No, we've talked about a few people who were unfortunately there at the wrong time. You know, we know about how Indian teams were full of great spinners in the 60s and 70s. So I played 5 years of top division cricket in Bombay. And there was a left arm bowler called Padmakar Shivalkar. I played Shivalkar 3-4 times. Now, Shivalkar would have walked into any other world team. He would have walked into the team in England or Australia or anywhere. He happened to be at his best parallel to the time of Bishan Singh Bedi. So, Padmakar Shivalkar in Bombay and Rajinder Goel in Delhi never got to play Test cricket. They were there at the wrong time. That's one. Then there are others who played 1 or 2 or 3 tests because of selectorial whims. There was a brilliant batsman called T. Srinivasan in Chennai. I played with him, I watched him. He was an absolutely brilliant attacking batsman. He played 1 test. He toured Australia. They played him in 1 test against New Zealand, I think it was. He scored 22 and 28 in the 2 innings. That's it. He never played Test cricket again. And let me take you back. Way back in 1952, Pakistan touring India. Pakistan's first ever Test tour. First 4 games, we won 2 and lost 1, I think. The 5th test, there was a man from Maharashtra, a left-hander called Deepak Shodhan. He played that test. It was his debut test. He scored 110, saved us from a lot of blushes. He was selected to tour West Indies. Soon after, he went to West Indies, played just 2 tests. That's it. Nobody heard of. And that was a time when we had no left-handers. Deepak Shodhan was a left-hander. Nobody knows. His test average is something like 60. So we were talking about those kind of players, wondering the whims of selectorial whims and maybe other considerations are perhaps some of the reasons why some people are not so lucky as others.
Can I add something? Story about this chapter. How did this chapter occur? I distinctly remember one Sunday afternoon, suddenly on ESPN's website, there's a news item saying T. Srinivasan battling cancer. Cancer. He was terminally ill. He was going. Something hit me. I said, what is this? And I have seen T. bat, and I think he was absolutely one of the most graceful batsmen, elegant batsmen. And I felt how it had been so unfair that he got to play only 1 test. And from there we discussed and built this chapter called They Too Played for India. They Too Played for India means they may have played 1 test or not at all, but they too played for India. To the younger generation, I can say, there was a fine batsman from Bombay called Amol Mazumdar. To me, he is as good as any of the other batsmen who may have played 30 tests or 40 tests for India. It's just sheer bad luck. On the other hand, you have Dilip Doshi, the left-arm spinner, born around the same time as Bedi, couple of years younger to Goel and probably Shivalkar. but stayed on, hung on, and played to take 100 wickets. Incidentally, one light comment, he said he played Shivalkar 3-4 times. Raghu is a left-hander, and the story is Shivalkar will bowl to Raghu and say, Tera cover drive dikhana, tera cover drive dikhana, and Raghu will refuse to play the cover drive.
And he said, don't play me so carefully. Show me your
Sure.
graceful drive.
Cover drive dikha.
In Bombay cricket, they talk a lot, as they bowl.
Okay, so one more story about talk a lot. So Raghu is actually a left-hand bat, but he also bowls some part-time off spin. He says he's very accurate. When I played, I thought they were donkeyed. No, he'll get angry. So Raghu was playing Dilip Sardesai, and as Raghu bowled the ball, the match was coming to an end. Raghu bowled a ball.
The captain gave me the over because he wanted the match to end.
But as Raghu bowled, before the ball landed, Dilip Sardesai talks a lot. Dilip Sardesai said, "6, before he could connect. Said, "6, and he hit it into the
And hit me into the tennis court.
Okay. But I have partnered Raghu when Raghu was nearly 40 and I'm 30. I gone one down. I was a leg spinner, but I went one down. I used to play one down for the team, although I was the leg spinner. And I had the privilege of batting and seeing Raghu from the non-striker end. Even at that time when he dropped out of first division cricket, Raghu's timing was sublime and the way he had time to play was awesome. To those of you who've seen Khwaja bat, I keep insisting that when I see Khwaja bat, I'm reminded of Raghu of the 80s.
Thank you. I think we just have a single question remaining before we open the forum for the audience. Okay, so Mid-Wicket Tales is basically a happy book, something that makes you appreciate about the beauty of the game and how we feel good about being a cricket fan. And you have been good to many good people. But one thing you have been hitting out mercilessly was something we now call the Dusra. Please convey your dislike for the Dusra.
I think you need to.
Okay. I'm a leg spinner, I said. I believe technically that if you are a leg spinner, it's impossible to chuck. Okay. Umpire is here. Sir, you agree with me that as a leg spinner, it's difficult. As an off spinner, you open your chest and you tend to bend your elbow. And there are many off spinners who bowl the chucker. So you've got to be very careful. On top of it, for the off spinner, as it is, it's difficult. You then have to bowl the Dusra where you bowl it like this. The older days, they had the leg cutter. And therefore, with the same action, they could take the ball away from the batsman towards slip. That was the variation that the off spinner will bring.
This and this.
Exactly.
That's all.
But now you're coming like this. And that's where the problem occurs. And it is definitely a pernicious introduction into the game. You can wink and close your eye or you can call it out. Now of late, after we wrote that chapter, you can see how much more strict, it's not because of time, that a lot of people now call the Dusra out and the Dusra is almost going away from the game. In fact, in our revised chapter conclusion, one of the good things we have said about the development of the game in the last 10 years is that the Dusra is now going out of the game. Nobody could be happier than the late Bishan Singh Bedi.
In fact, he said that you were too gentle on these chuckers.
Bishan Bedi told us that, yeah, tum Madrasi log aise hi ho. You know how Bishan says, no? Bishan, when you have to use a small hathoda, will use a pile driver. Yaar, tum aise hi ho, yaar. You should have written it straight. So we said, Bishan Pa, we have done this. No, you should do it. Your Venkatraman is also this. So I could do some mimicry of Bishan, but God bless his soul. What a wonderful man. He called us within one day of receiving the book to tell us that he loved the book. I said, Bishan, you have read the book already? No. I read 2 chapters. It's enough to tell me that the book is good.
And he was such a lovely man. A year later, we had floods in Madras, and Bishan calls him and says, I'm trying to get these people. Raghu is not picking up his phone. Venkatragavan, I can't trace him. Are they okay?
How are my friends Raghu and Venkatragavan doing? Yeah, again, we mentioned about Sri V. Ramnarayan just a few moments ago. He happened to share an anecdote. Prasanna, Saklen Mustaq is claimed to be the founder of Dusra, but he told me Prasanna could bowl the Dusra perfectly. without chucking or any other action. But he never used it in his playing days because he was of the opinion that I haven't mastered the art yet. So it will be wrong if I use it in the field. Great man. So yeah, that's it. I am done from my side and we'll open the forum for the audience. Again, the only thing is questions need to be questions and not statements.
So, since you have watched so much cricket, who is the greater leg spinner, Chandrasekhar or Vaughan?
I'm going to go back a little. Why do we start with Chandrasekhar? Way back in 1954-55, I watched Subhash Gupte. Subhash Gupte, to me, is the greatest leg spinner India has produced. He had two googlies. The first one, he'll bowl, so the batsman, it's the more obvious one, will pick it and think, I can pick his googly. Then he'll bowl the other one later. He was a master of flight and he had tremendous control. And please remember when the three W's, Worrell, Walcott and Weeks, were playing between 52 and 56, they went around telling everyone that the greatest spinner they had faced was Subhash Gupte. So, that's number one. Pardon? And Gupte moved to West Indies, married a West Indian, stayed there for the rest of his life and died there. Yeah, Subhash Gupte, Bombay. Now, coming back to Vaughan, I think Vaughan was an absolutely brilliant spinner and had so many variations. He had a flipper, he had a slider, and he was extraordinarily accurate and he was a prodigious turner of the ball. We've seen Vaughan getting people out from almost the end of the wicket turf and turning it like this. So Vaughan was an amazingly big turner of the ball. The other person you said? Chandra was a different kettle of fish. Chandra was fast. He was faster than most leg spinners, and Kirmani will tell you that the greatest skill that one needed was to keep to Chandra. I've seen Chandra bowling a bouncer against England. He was very, very fast, so they were completely different kind of spinners. But one must say, one had a wider and longer career, played against more opponents, and succeeded against almost all of them except India.
In India.
In India.
Yeah. Just one point on one. The spin that he gets is one thing, but the drift he got. So as he bowls, the ball would drift like this. So when it drifts like this, it comes to the blind side of a batsman. If it doesn't drift so much, it's not a problem. So I think Vaughan, along with the spin, the drift was a hell of a lot. By the way, talking of Chandra and Vaughan, when you say, there are different categories. So for example, you look at Tiger O'Reilly, Bill O'Reilly, very fast. Then you have, exactly, in our generation. So for example, there are two categories. One's like Kumble, for example. Now they kept saying Kumble doesn't turn the ball, Kumble doesn't, nonsense. He took 600 wickets because he had certain skills and strengths that nobody else had. Batsmen were trapped by him. Actually, Kumble needed to turn the ball only so much, either this way or that way. And Kumble kept learning. Even in his towards the end of his career, he developed a different googly. The left little finger will not go up. There was something else there.
Sir, can I? Yeah. I.
The question is, Vaughan or Chandrasekhar? What do you think?
Right. So, a book such as yours, did you also include a chapter on umpires who bring so much of character to the cricket field itself, and they too have played for India in a sense? And according to you, who is the best Indian umpire?
We haven't done justice to the umpires in the book, I must admit.
Nobody ever does.
Okay. No. Fact. However, the redeeming feature is we have an entire chapter on LBW decision making. and the DRS, and how certain umpires have said that look, it's very, very difficult to call out, and they have questioned Hawkeye, etc. So we have one chapter on LBW. So in some senses, a discussion around umpiring.
Yeah.
And second, we have an entire chapter where we have talked to Venkat and where we have asked Venkat about umpiring. So slightly better than many others, but not adequately. Over to you, Raghu.
In that Venkatraghavan chapter, we've talked a little about Venkatraghavan the cricketer and a lot about Venkatraghavan the umpire. Because we spent about 4 hours in his house when he talked about his umpiring career. And one very interesting story he said. He said it's very easy for armchair experts to sit and say, stupid umpiring, poor umpiring, whatever. And he said it's also easy for other people, including commentators, to be critical about umpiring. So Venkat said, I was in Australia, I was umpiring, and Ian Chappell, Tony Greig, and who's the third one? 3 of these people were in the commentator's box. Not Benno there. This story didn't have Benno. The third one I forget.
Yeah, I also forget, Raghu.
So he said, end of the day, we were having a drink in the evening, and I challenged the 3 of them. I said, tomorrow, as soon as any LBW appeal is made, before the replay is shown in slow motion, you 3 guys call out or not, and tell me at the end of the day how many you got right. Right? And he said, at the end of the day, the next day, he said, Tony Greig said I got 8 out of 10 wrong. Ian Chappell said I got all 10 wrong. And then all 3 of them said, you guys have a desperately difficult job. So umpiring is very, very difficult on the ground. And there's another thing. It's very difficult for today's digital camera to figure out a few things. Venkat was talking about this. He said, your DRS is purely digital technical. So it shows the bounce based on what has happened so far and based on mathematics and your trajectory, etc. He says, I'm the umpire. I know whether the ball is 20 overs old or softer 60 overs old. I know whether this ball landed on the seam or landed on the side. And when I'm standing there, I know it. Your camera will never know it. So he says, very often umpires can judge what would be the height at which the ball would have crossed the stump better than your digital cameras can.
Yeah, so my question to both of you is, I think you mentioned about Amol Muzumdar. So all of us who understands cricket, have been following cricket, understand he was such a talented person, such a talented batsman who has played domestic cricket for a long time, and he surely deserved his spot in the Indian cricket team for the test format at least, right? Similarly, we have a story in Nagpur. You might be knowing Vidarbha captain Mr. Faiz Fazal, who is also a great cricketer, who had great first-class career and a great journey. Again, he did not got a spot in the team, right? So my question is, why do these things happen, right? Especially when cricket is prevalent everywhere. There are so many formats. Why do these talented cricketers are not getting their due and their position in the team, right? What goes behind? Do they need to satisfy the egos of the big bosses in the behind the scenes, or what happens? What really goes behind, according to you?
I'll begin with something and Raghu can add. First of all, this is one place where by and large you can be sure that it is meritocracy and it is judgment. So you cannot smell nepotism in the selection to an Indian cricket team. Okay, 15th player in Delhi team related to XYZ, yes, I can understand. But look at the Indian cricket team. You will always have arguments only about the 14th, 15th and 16th player in a team. not even 14, 15 sometimes. Should you get this guy as a 16? So it's usually the selection, you must take it for granted, is done with all good faith, good intention, and judgment. Sometimes what happens, if there are 4 or 5 selectors, they take a call that his numbers are good, I don't know about the temperament, or I don't know about that wicket or this, so can we play him? Sometimes what happens, a player gets a break, holds on to it, and somebody else, because there are only 11 places in the team. There are only 2 opening places and a backup opener. Since 1877, when cricket started, to today, you can count how many players have played for the country. So each country, there are 6 or 7 countries, I think it will be in a couple of thousand players. We have written how many exactly in our book.
Maybe about 3,000.
So that's how
Test cricketers all time.
So that's how difficult it is. So I think we should remove cynicism from it. Yes, there can be the odd time when we say he should have been selected on this tour, guy can get selected next time or miss it. There can be the odd hard luck story. So it can be a hard luck story and nothing else. Amol Majumdar's career overlapped with the fabulous 4, unfortunately or fortunately. And it was very difficult. Even within the 4, you knew Ganguly had to sometimes bat 4 down, and then you had to make your team up, or Lakshman would bat 4 down. And Lakshman was unhappy. Lakshman wanted to play 1 down. But Dravid was 1 down. So it's so incredibly difficult to get into even a first class team, Ranji Trophy team. Forget. So I think we should not be cynical about team selection. They are trying to do their best. Zonal biases are a problem. Now I think even that is coming down. People are being picked.
It's so much better than what it was. Please remember that. Way back in the 50s and 60s, you had to be from West Zone to be in the Indian cricket team. We had 2 players, Ghulam Ahmad from Hyderabad, Pankaj Roy from Bengal. All others were from Bombay, Baroda. That's it. 9 or 10 players.
So it's a very, very different now.
Hi, sir. Sir, is there too much cricket, and will cricket become just an Indian continental sport?
I certainly think there is too much cricket. It's telling on the fitness of players. And it's also telling on, it's very, very difficult to play all 3 formats. You know, if you're a test batsman, it's so very different to build up an innings with temperament and go bang, bang, bang in T20. And we expect some people to do both very well. And when they fail sometimes, we say, look at this guy. You know, I was thinking of this earlier, in our earlier session, when our friend was talking about Kohli in 2014, failing in that tour in England. Kohli was already playing both T20 and one-day cricket. And you know, in cricket, you get something like 0.6 seconds for the ball to reach the batsman. But you can't wait 0.6 seconds. In the first 0.15 seconds, you have to decide whether you have to play, leave, forward or backward, attack or defend. And you can't do this in 3 steps. It's intuitive. And what you do in the nets, your trigger will make you do the same thing when you're playing a match. And you can't do one thing in Test cricket and do a completely different thing in T20. You have to more or less play the same way. And when people don't realize this, it's very easy to criticize people. Playing all 3 formats is no fun. That's why Chateshwar Pujara, Murali Vijay and all were just Test cricketers. Didn't play the other formats.
Any more questions?
Commerce drives a lot of this.
Any more questions? Kids one.
Sir, so why were you genuinely interested in cricket and you became a leg spinner? I think so. Sorry, that is right.
How did you become a leg spinner?
I don't know. I don't know, because when I was 6 or 7, I was fortunate enough to be taught the game by the guy living opposite us. He was the South Zone School's off spinner, but he was teaching me batting with a tennis ball underarm because I was 7 or 6 or 7. And as I grew up, while I did like to bat, who doesn't like batting and who wants to get out? Somehow I was always interested in rolling my arm and bowling. I was much shorter then in school. So when I played schools cricket, I was short and I could bowl leg spin and I continued doing that. It's a different matter that afterwards I became a rotten leg spinner.
Sir, I wanted to ask you that what made interest in fielding? You said you liked fielding, and why did you think fielding was one of the most important aspects of cricket? And in the past, fielding was disregarded, but currently it is not as disregarded as in the past. So, do you think fielding has improved, or it is the same since past?
Oh, it has improved tremendously, significantly, because cricket, was a pastime then. Today, it's a good cricketer can earn crores of money, and people are very, very serious about becoming a good cricketer. And there is so much awareness now about fitness, and coaches won't pick you unless you're fit. And if you're fit, you have to show it in fielding. Why is Ashwin very often not taken? Because he's a slow mover. He's not a great fielder. That goes against him. So fielding is an absolute must, and we have always felt, you can bowl brilliantly, you can plan a dismissal, but the guy has to take the catch, na? Otherwise, what's the big deal? So the best fielding sides always have a huge advantage. Subhash Gupte took 160 wickets in his career. If he had bowled today, he would have taken 300 wickets because nobody could take catches then. He had to get them bowled or LBW.
Thank you for a brilliant session. It just proves why cricket is so much loved, because including me, everybody thinks I know better than the other person about cricket, and I always have a view how they should play, when they should play. So thank you so much, sir. And as I said before, it is the forgotten art of storytelling in cricket, which used to be so close to us. I still remember as a kid, there used to be this program on radio called Cricket with Vijay Merchant. It used to come on every Sunday. And somehow, yes, the commentary is there, but it is hearing Raghu and Giri, it is bringing back the old world charm of cricket. Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to ask our core member, Mr. Dilip Kamdar, to please present the mementos. These are specially crafted frames of historical monuments of Nagpur. It is made for VLF by Mandira. I would like Dilip Bhai to present it to Giri and Raghu. And a token of appreciation to Paddy. Thank you so much. We'll be breaking up for lunch now. There's a buffet at the ground floor restaurant Mogra at a special price of 350 rupees for VLF visitors. I would also like to mention once again the authors Giri and Raghu will be available for signing and for conversations that you would like to carry on. They'll be either at the lawn behind the authors lounge or on the ground floor or opposite Laburnum on this floor.